developments in COVID.
Okay, here I am. Well, I must say that I'm working on this field from several years, and thanks to Race of Asia, because the first time...
Paolo, let me just interrupt you briefly. For those of you, there's a recording ongoing. You're going to see a message, so please accept that message. All right? Okay, thanks. Paolo,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to say that thanks to Rise of Asia conference, because exactly we were starting in 2018 to present a paper about ecology, architecture, and so on. So it's something that has been rising in the last years, depending on that, and now is absolutely very, very actual. Well, I'm working in SDGs working group of ICOMOS. That is we're working practically every day. Now we have another meeting because all that is related to climate change, ecology, and all those topics has been having an enormous rise, I would say, in the last years, and especially now with the pandemic, all this has been increasing really a lot. Scenarios that we were thinking that would be possible within 15, 20 years, they have become really immediate in a few months. And I think that I am convinced that maybe I'm wrong, but I'm convinced that this pandemic will make a very strong change in our life. It's changing a lot on our model of living. And well, for the moment, it's not helping too much to the climate change because the return to private mobility, the closure of public transport, etc., and a very cold winter here in Europe has been increasing all the emissions. But it has been clear as on the first month of the total almost global lockdown we had at the beginning of the pandemic, that all the pollution and all the factors of on climate change, they have been reducing strongly. The stop of all the industrial activities, like it was for the first month, has been reducing practically everything, all the fumes and everything like that, in about 60% all around the globe. If you remember, you can see photos from China, from Peking, that the sky was blue completely, without no mask, without clouds, and without the fog they have always from that. So I think it has been really, really a big change. So I would like to make a small presentation about that. And here we are. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is something that, like I told you, we were writing exactly last year, that it was sustainable urban development now has becoming pandemic impacts. Okay. Well, one of the main factors for sure on climate change is the big concentration of human people in big cities. Big cities now, by some wrong paradigm, was considered to be the only place where people would live in the future. Was expected to be in 2030 about 70% of global population, and big cities are also they're covering only the 2% of the surface of the globe. They represent about 22% of the impacts on climate change, on negative impacts. So the pandemic has been showing is a trend. I don't know, I think it's the same all around the world, but especially here in Europe, is a big demand of people to go back to smaller villages, to more in contact with the nature, and we have and what is very important, they have I would say a completely different type of life depending on what it is, the social. But we're touching this after. This was a program that about till 20 years ago, I think, was almost impossible, because there was a big gap between the big cities technologically and the small towns. But now the arrival of new technologies, the arrival of e-learning, home working, telemedicine, the phones that are taking you the blood test and whatever it is, and the broadband every place should arrive is changing completely our daily habits of life. So what is important? That we start to think to approach all the settlement or the planning model, not anymore thinking about profit or about per capita incomes like that, but we have to think to an approach who's taking in account all the social and environmental aspects of our problem. Now, if we can succeed to make a good network around the world of infrastructures, of networks, of energy and logistics, we can change completely the model of settlement. Here we see how in a few years, for example, a big city has been increasing from what it was in 73, so just 50 years ago, to what it is in 2020. Okay. So, yes, this is the impact of what I was telling you. Metropolis are responsible of 20% of global climate change, emissions of CO2, pollution. They're using a lot of water resources, a lot of land use that is taken away from agriculture. Instead, smaller towns are offering better quality of daily life, a favorable environmental context, and strong social cohesion and community. And this is one of the main hits. Okay, it's very important that we consider that smaller towns and villages, they represent each one a very strong identity. They have very tangible patrimony of their typical architecture. They have intangible traditions that are important the same. They have using local materials, so they're not using natural resources that are not necessary. So it's necessary to keep, look the terraces, for example. They have been all around centuries, all around the world, one of the main ways to defend territory from floods and strong rains. So we have to maintain the landscape. We have to preserve the intangible patrimony, that these are assets that cannot be lost. So the revival for these small towns is to follow the SDGs, the main objective of Agenda 2030, and some of them are very directly involved, like number 6, number 7, number 11, number 10, number 13, and number 15. So we have to protect the environment, mitigate the migration. That is one of the main problems that we have been facing in the last decades, from rural areas to urban areas, from one country to the other, from one continent to the other. We have to preserve the heritage, we have to enhance the patrimony, and we have to save the unique patrimony. And the stay of human settlements in this on the territory is a presidium against wildfire, against floods, against the destruction of the landscape and of the ground. Okay, so here is what now the pandemic has been put in evidence. Social quality and cohesion. In the big cities, we have been assisting to a very loose of this main factor. Instead, in the small towns, is still existing a solidarity net that has been helping also in the difficult moments. So social cohesion is one of the main goals, is one of the main goals now of the European Union, because it's giving also sense of community. You are belonging to something, everyone is participating. This is helping to reduce the imbalance between urban and rural areas. You have a better quality of life, and for sure you have a different way of development, but probably is more sustainable. The new vision is allowing that if you're using now the modern technologies, you can change completely from also to the smaller things, to agriculture, to the use of drones are helping to survey the land, to see crops and things like that. So now home working, e-learning, e-medicine, online shopping are used now very wide, has been increasing, I think, in the last year of the pandemic, about 30%, and is not going away, these habits. You are needing to move less, so less pollution. You are reducing gap of services because you can get the same product of Amazon in the main city or just in the small hamlet in the countryside. And very important, you can use modern technologies to have a more easy type of agriculture. So I think what you have to do is to, and this is one of the things I am here, and we have another conference because we are trying to make a wide opinion to change completely the vision and the approach. We have to modify the actual paradigm that is saying that we have to live all in the future human being in big cities, in smart cities, or whatever it is. We must have a holistic approach considering the social, the environmental, historical, and all the factors that are making important place. We have to intervene in homogeneous areas, not so bottom-up planning of territories who are sharing habits, traditions, and way of living. Strategies must be at long term. We have to apply completely new territorial models based on a much better use of the land. We have to use advanced technology, and obviously, in the end, we need to improve also physical accessibility because we cannot live in secluded hermits or towns, but we have to communicate each other. So I'm soon ending. The final, the COVID has been highlighted in inadequacy of the current urban settlement model, accepted as the inevitable urbanization trend of much of humanity in the last decades. This difficult situation in which the whole planet is affected, when ended, we have significant consequences in many sectors, not only for the economy, that will recover not fast. Yes. So I think this is, like I said, this is changing. Every month is passing of pandemic. Things are changing more and more for not coming back again. And who is always, pandemic probably will be winner in 2021, 2022. I don't know. We'll be arriving other pandemics because this is a change, the climate change, I believe, producing also the pandemic. But what is dramatic is the impact, because no one is talking about the impact. The impact is that the economic shock that we're having, we are talking already for a recovery in the best of the cases in 2025. So it means that we have to consider really the way that we manage our economies. And probably in another way of living in smaller towns and villages, you are living with a good quality of life with a lower budget. Okay, is necessary so to implement measures to mitigate the ongoing urbanization trend as soon as possible to reduce the negative effect of pollution, environment, land use, and natural resources. The global action oriented to revamp rural settlements and retain a number of inhabitants and emerging countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. These continents can be the promoters. What we're seeing now since many years of this dramatic immigrant situation from North Africa, from Africa to Europe, and from Central America to United States, this is all due because they don't have the minimum livable situation in their own countries. So if we are changing completely, but not as academic, but we make people understand how this is important and to write to the authorities and politicians about that, we can really not immediately, but going toward a shift about the model and allow Africans to live in their countries, Central America or Latin Americans to live in their country without moving around searching for a better quality of life. That is a lie. It's not true at all. So that is all that I want to say. And I would like that everyone in your own countries, if you're sharing these ideas, you're promoting them somehow. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Paolo. And I like the connection with the SDGs as well. It's our multidisciplinary approaches are quite needed at this time. So it's good to see, even as an architect, you're making that link between the human settlements and the environment. All right, so moving on, we'll go to Yanti Kusumanto. She's from Indonesia and is a research consultant at TYK Research and Action Consulting in the Netherlands. Her topic is dealing with Greater Jakarta flooding inclusively from social, environmental, and economic perspectives. So Yanti, over to you.
Thank you, Devon. It is a pleasure for me and my colleague Ayu, who is also going to speak later on, to present our work on the Jakarta flooding problem. We will present the content of a policy brief, which we have developed on this issue together with other co-authors. So we are also speaking on their behalf. This policy brief makes part of a larger initiative on 6. So we are developing 6 policy briefs on this issue, and this initiative has been initiated by members of the diaspora community in the Netherlands, Indonesian diaspora community in the Netherlands, and we are working together in developing these policy briefs with researchers and experts in the Netherlands, the UK, and also in Indonesia. Well, I'd like to share some presentation slides. So can I share the slides, Devon?
Yeah, you can share the screen and then you can select it. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, could you
Perfect.
see the slides? All right, so let me see. Oh, it's always a bit of a hassle. This is not the first, okay. All right, so let's go to the first slide. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is our topic. I will start with some introductory and umbrella part of the presentation, and you will follow later on, because he is actually the true expert on this on Jakarta related to flooding. You can see here on the cover slide an air imagery that was taken on January 2nd last year during the quite severe flooding, which is actually happening annually. So it is a current or a recurrently flooding problem. Yeah, so some background, as I said earlier, the policy brief that we have developed makes part of a larger initiative. And we are also speaking on behalf of other co-authors. I'm leading the development of the policy brief. The policy brief series is intended to have as expected audience the Indonesian government at various levels, and of course government institutions in Greater Jakarta itself. What is the context of the flooding problem in Greater Jakarta? Well, Greater Jakarta is a low-lying delta with 13 rivers flowing through the region for water discharge into Jakarta Bay. And Jakarta has known floods actually since ancient times. As you can see here, this is a painting of 1780 showing Jakarta, colonial Jakarta, so Batavia, where you can see quite sophisticated canal systems built by the Dutch. The mega city is one of the most flood-prone cities globally, with 50% people living in flood-prone areas, which comes to about 15 million people living in flood-prone areas. Flood measures have been largely focused on infrastructure-focused engineering solutions. And it has been focused to control Jakarta's hydrology. And this actually can be dated back to the Dutch colonial times. And until now, this paradigm of infrastructural solutions for mitigating floods have been quite dominant even until now. Flooding has intensified due to land subsidence and driven by groundwater extraction and soil compaction because of the mega city buildings and infrastructures. And since more recently, flooding has also been due to sea level rise induced by climate change. What is actually the problem that we'd like to tackle in our policy brief? There has been little attention so far to the anthropogenic causes of flooding, such as economic growth, urbanization, socioeconomic inequities, which adversely have affected the environment. Furthermore, flood mitigation takes little account of social and ecological impacts of infrastructural measures. Another aspect of the problem is that there is an institutional misalignment between different government levels, different sectors, and also even different between, for example, the regional government and the ministerial authorities. And the last aspect of the problem is the mismatch between eco-regional boundaries and administrative jurisdictions, leading to uncoordinated flood governance. Our approach, or the approach that we have used in the policy brief, is to integrate three international or global frameworks, and that is the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals actually provides a framework that views poverty reduction as an umbrella aim to enhance development, to be more inclusive, socially, economically, and environmentally. A second global framework that we'd like to refer to in our approach is the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. For a reason that Jakarta will not achieve sustainable development unless flood risks are effectively managed. And the third global framework is the Paris Agreement on climate change, particularly its climate change adaptation component. The loss and damage which may result from climate-driven floods are a main obstacle for sustainable development. For that reason, flood risk reduction should go hand in hand with climate change adaptation. What have we done in going about this approach in our policy brief? We have tried to also be pragmatic because we'd like to get our messages and recommendations across to the Indonesian government. So we have tried to oh, I'm stopping the share screening. I think something went wrong, sorry. Okay, there we go again. Yeah, so Indonesia is committed, the Indonesian government or Indonesia as a state is committed to implement these three UN or global policies, but serious concerns have remained on how to integrate these three fields and translate that into real action. So we have tried to start with concrete existing Indonesian policies and have identified opportunities, how to integrate these three policies. And we will share with you. Hello, am I still there? I think
Yes.
I have some trouble with going to the next slide. Let me see. Okay. So we will share two policies that we have identified for promoting this integration of the three policies, global policies. And the first policy is the Jakarta Medium-Term Development Plan 2017-2022. We have identified that when you integrate 4 strategic issues, 4 of the 18 strategic issues in the development plan, opportunity is created to promote integration of the 3 global policies. And these 4 strategic issues are the enhancement of equal access to public services to the disabled. Second one is women's advancement. A third strategic issue that we'd like to integrate with the other 3 is reduction of economic inequities. And a fourth issue is the anticipation of fluvial, coastal, and surface flooding. A second policy that we also would like to promote to integrate for the integration of the 3 policies, global policies, is a national regulation issued by the president on the Greater Jakarta Urban Area Spatial Plan. One of the articles stipulate that an institution, a coordinating institution, should be designated to coordinate the implementation of the spatial plan. I will leave it at that, and we'll hand it over to Ayu. Ayu, the floor is yours. I will keep sharing the slides.
Yeah. Thank you, Yanti. Okay, everyone. Now I'm going to go to more detail on our inclusiveness, which it can be achieved through social, economic, and environment perspective for the integration of SDGs, DRR, and CCA. So this can be done through inserting flood risk reductions and climate change adaptation in the existing program, while linking intervention to the sustainable development priorities. In order to have socially, economically, and environmentally inclusive. First, I would like to mention here, for the inclusive, based on a social perspective, we can see from the existing program what mentioned that about enhancement of equal access. So this already exists in the midterm development plan of Jakarta. But then we try to promote about the importance of women advancement. It should be in line with the flood risk preparedness. So we try to focus on the improvement of the existing strategic issue in terms of disaster risk reductions, as well as engage women in the decision-making process in the disaster risk management. We highlight the gender concern here because we find that the role of women is very significant actually in the disaster management, from preparedness until recovery. But the inclusive program for women on that particular topic is still left behind. And moreover, for the inclusive, from the economic perspective, we can see from the reduction of economic inequity, Yanti already mentioned about that. Actually, this is specifically can help us to reduce susceptibility as part of the vulnerability, especially among the community. And then the second that we have to highlight here is the importance to adapt accordingly public delivery build back better activities, which this can be an opportunity to increase capacity to build resilience, particularly among the vulnerable community in Jakarta and also the Greater Jakarta. And the third, we propose that to structure and also develop impact assessment frameworks to mainstream SDGs, DRR, and CCE at programmatic and project level. So this means we need an evaluation for the integration program for inclusiveness instead of a parallel evaluation for each framework that now we mainly most of the government level have that approach. So still parallel evaluation. The next slide, please, Yanti. Yeah, so as mentioned earlier about the opportunity from the President regulations about the number 60 2020, particularly opportunity from we can generate the inclusiveness from environment perspective. We can see first from the polycentric governance. This is actually one of the very important aspects to success the building resilience. In the polycentric governance, in the regulation, President regulation, it mentioned that the flood, the concerning Jakarta urban area spatial plan, it will include multiple line ministries and also sectoral agencies, as well as various government levels. And this is important to apply this governance at the practical stage. And the second is the opportunity of the integrated eco-regional flood governance. So actually, this highlights the approach that across boundary of administrative jurisdiction, sectors, and institutions. Because now we already aware that's very important to manage or reduce risks of to flood in Jakarta across administrative boundaries, but in the implementation, we still do it in parallel. So this regulation actually highlights the importance to go back, to go beyond this cross-boundary administrative. And then the third is the improvement of natural element in the ecosystem. So this means that we need to highlight the very ecosystem-based services, basically. For example, we try to increase the building of ponds and then lake detention pond, which this can be part of environmentally exclusive. Next slide, please. And for the transitions to a boundary spanning eco-regional flood governance of Greater Jakarta, as mentioned in the President regulations, first, it is important then to develop integrated eco-regional flood governance. So, so we go beyond one step ahead in terms of the concept, and then we need to develop that. They anchored in basin decision making, which also highlights the decision-making process that beyond administrative boundaries. And second, nature-based solution based on the newest multidiscipline scientific information and best available knowledge, because we recognize there are several and there are extensive study on this, and we should consider all of the scientific perspective. And then third, the collaborative decision making also should be the core of governance approach. So it's the time to really make this, the collaboratives should be happen clearly, and then and the very integrated process. And then as also mentioned in the regulation of the President regulation about the Greater Jakarta Spatial Plan, we need to design a coordinating institute where we think that Jakarta should lead the transition process prior to the operations of the coordinating institute. Because first, Jakarta is the capital city of Indonesia, and then face the main problem of the flood. And the third is, it's very important to develop a strategic environmental analysis based on the available scientific data and well-tested verified methods, which this is also very important because recently we still have only parallel for each areas, and then still lack for the the integrations of the river basin approach. And the next, please, Bu Yanti. And the conclusion of our presentation, as also the conclusion of our policy brief is actually inclusiveness is a win-win solution in dealing with Greater Jakarta flooding, as it accounts for the underlying problem of vulnerabilities. And then the interesting thing, actually, the opportunities for the SDGs, the RR and CCA integrations actually already there. So Jakarta has done a lot for that, both institutional and program plans perspective, but we only need to find that and then really implement all that programs that already mentioned, and then strengthen in part of the disaster risk reduction and also climate change adaptation. And then for the implementation to be successful, actually equal distribution of knowledge and aligned flood risk perception among policymakers and related stakeholders are required. Because currently we still can see that perceptions among the policymakers still quite diverse and varies among them in terms of looking at flood itself, whether it's man-made or natural disaster or both, because it will influence the decision-making process for the policy and program. That's the additional from my side. Thank you very much for your attention and welcome for the comments and inputs. Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Devon.
Everyone, please hold your questions for the end after we finish all the presentations. So thank you, Yanti and Ayu. Ayu, just one question. Are you attached to the Indonesian Institute of Sciences?
Yes, yes, Indonesian Institute of Sciences. Hello?
All right, because okay, yeah, because I didn't introduce you, but I noticed the logo on the presentation, so I need to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now we're gonna move, still keeping within the framework of climate change, which is one of the reasons for perhaps some of the increased flooding in Indonesia as well. We're gonna go to Chiagozie Udeh. He is from Nigeria, and presentation is financing climate adaptation, key for Africa's climate resilience. So just a little bit about him. He's an expert on climate change policy, energy campaigning, and a youth leader in Africa's clean energy sector. And he is the program coordinator for Plant for the Planet in Nigeria. And in 2019, he was elected chairperson of the executive global board of Plant for the Planet. But I'm not sure if he still holds that position, but at least in 2019 he did. All right, so over to you, Chiagozie.
Yes, thank you, Devon.
I hope
Thanks
I got
a lot.
the name right.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, and it's been a pleasure to listen to the previous presenters. A very robust presentation, and putting issues in perspective, how it's happening across the world. I don't have a presentation, and I hope you'll pardon me for that, but I'm going to speak pretty much off the cuff on issues like you introduced, on issues around financing climate adaptation and how it's key to Africa's resilience, and also how South-South cooperation can help to ensure adaptation globally, especially within the global South countries. First is that globally.
By any chance, do you have a camera?
Oh yes, sure.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm on my iPad. It could switch off at some point because I have my notes as well. But yeah, you can see me, yeah? Can you see my camera now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, so first is that globally we have over 90% of climate financing goes to mitigation, and this has been the trend, of course, because the developed countries who are financing climate change, or who are putting the funding for climate climate finance, whether it be the GCF, the Global Climate Finance, or the Adaptation Funding, or the Global Environment Facility. They are financing a lot heavily on mitigation components of climate change. And countries in Africa, for example, or countries, the small island developing states, or other countries in the global south, as a matter of fact, especially like we see with Indonesia, they require a lot of adaptation measures, but they are not getting the required financing that they need for this to happen. Of course, we know that from 2020 that we expect world leaders or global countries to be able to contribute $100 billion annually to the global the Green Climate Fund to be able to finance. And the Green Climate Fund, is setting it up, was estimated or was expected to fund mitigation and adaptation equally. But what we have now, according to current data that I had access to, was that it's tried to allocate up to 40% to adaptation. Previously, it was 29% exclusively to adaptation, about 46-49% to mitigation, and the other ones were shared in a mix of adaptation and mitigation. But currently, it's trying to scale that up, but it's still way below what is required. And I have to put this in perspective. For example, where I come from in Nigeria, I'm not in Nigeria now, I'm actually in Kenya, but I'm normally based in Geneva. So for example, in Nigeria, where I come from, we have a lot of flooding since 2012, where every year there's a lot of that is displacing people that they are owing globally, have infrastructural deficits, and this country cannot invest their national budget already in climate adaptation when they can't even, keep people in school, they can't provide security, they can't provide health care. There's a lot of competing priorities for countries like this to be able to cope with their infrastructural deficits first, and then look around to see what else they would do. So you find the culture of a lot of developing countries reserving climate financing or climate action, especially in adaptation, as the exclusive preserve of international funding partners. And this is not helpful. Of course, they don't have the financing to support this project because adaptation costs a lot of money, but it's what is required urgently in these places, because the villages are disappearing in a couple of countries in Africa, where like Senegal and coastal cities, they're being pursued back into the inlands. In a lot of places, there's prolonged droughts, and the farmers have to adapt to that. In Nigeria, again, it's causing a lot of conflict because in the northern part of the country, it has more drought, prolonged period of drought, and then we have the headsmen who rear the cows, and they are normally from the northern part of the country, and that is normally where they are supposed to graze their cows. But because of a lack of green area encroaching desertification, they have to take the cows downwards to the south, and they're invading people's farmlands. They're eating up crops. They're getting into conflict with farm owners. I kid you not, this issue has become, this clash between farmers and headsmen or headspeople have become one of the, I think it's about the fourth biggest cause of conflict in Africa, or I think globally. But for Nigeria, for example, it is the biggest cause of conflict and the biggest cause of death for the past 3 to 5 years. Even the terrorist groups, so Boko Haram and the rest of them, are not causing as much damage or causing as much lives as these folks are causing because of lack of grazing fields for their cows, and this is occasioned by drought in the northern part of the country, which pushes them southwards, and then they have to clash with the farmers in this area. So you putting all this in perspective, you see there's a growing challenge for developing countries to be able to adapt, to the effects of climate change. When we say climate emergency, the emergency in most places, especially in small island developing states and in countries like this, is that there's climate-induced disasters are becoming more often. They are more frequent, and you need immediate measures to stop them. You need immediate measures to safeguard communities. You need immediate measures to protect the most vulnerable people, women and children, young people. You need immediate measures to keep their homes safe if they need to be evacuated. So there's a lot of components. It requires both strengthening the early warning systems, making the health system climate resilient, building embankments in areas that require them. But all of these rise and fall on financing. So let's actually check around the accessibility of adaptation funding or climate financing. And as of 2019, as of November 2019, only 22 African countries have accessed, or we are currently accessing, the adaptation fund. Out of the remaining 34 countries, because Africa is 55 member states, 18 we are still in the study phase as of that time, and most of them are on the coast. Even then, we had the cyclone in Mozambique that affected Malawi and Zimbabwe, and these 3 countries were not even accessing adaptation fund. Again, we already had another cyclone in Mozambique again. So if a country has suffered 2 cyclones in 3 years, you can imagine the kind of destruction that it's facing. And it also has a component of displacement. So a report by CARE found that 33.4 million newly displaced people in 2019. That's out of those, 70% were displaced due to climate-related disaster. And this speaks to the fact that this climate-induced disasters will become more often, and is increasing the cost of adaptation. According to UNEP, a study they did earlier, I think in 2016, it says that the global yearly adaptation cost could increase to $300 billion by 2030 and $500 billion by 2050. But however, now we only have $30 billion that has been spent on adaptation between 2017 and 2018. This is grossly inadequate. You find that multilateral development banks fund 81% mitigation and adaptation as the rest of their funding. OECD are funding 56% mitigation, 19% to mitigation and adaptation combined, and the rest is exclusively adaptation. It speaks to a lot of financing injustice for climate adaptation, especially for these developing countries. And one more critical point about this is that even in some areas where financing are given for climate adaptation, they are given in form of loans. For example, I was on a panel with, I think it was the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda in Nairobi sometime during the ICPD 25, the International Conference for Population and Development. And we're talking about climate adaptation. And he said, like, we receive climate financing for our island, a small island. But then this is coming as loans. So when we are building embankments to stop flooding or encroachment, we are taking loan. And then these embankments we are building are going to be destroyed by the next cyclone or the next hurricane or the next flooding that is coming. So as you're building, it's being destroyed, you're pushed further in, and you have a loan to pay, and you have to borrow another one. So giving countries like this climate financing as loan, for me, it's criminal. I mean, it can't even be justified. So we have to have this conversation. There is a growing debt trap that is emerging in the area of climate financing, where countries are giving climate financing as loan that they can never pay. How can you give countries who have no capacity, in fact, their entire budgets cannot cater for an adaptation project, and you're giving them financing as loans where the infrastructure will again be destroyed by another climate-induced disaster, and they can't even provide basic needs, basic amenities for their citizens. So we really need to look into this area to make sure that countries are not getting into debt trap on the basis of climate financing. It is criminal to take climate financing as loans, to give countries loans as climate financing. There are a lot of mechanisms that we can use in the bilateral system to put climate financing on the table, and not as in form of loans. Of course, there is if you can make stringent measures to make sure that the funds are not misused, to make sure that if they are misused, they are repaid, but not to exclusively, be like the Messiah, and then you're banding about the place and saying you're helping countries while you're giving them loans to basically replace destruction that has happened because of the climate change that your heavy emissions is causing. So it's financing injustice to the extreme from my perspective. But then, how can we rally around this? First is that we need to remove the political bias and remove the business-oriented. Of course, every country has interest in diplomacy. You have your interest, and you have to make them count. We understand this, but there has to be equal financing for adaptation and mitigation. While a lot of developed countries need to do a lot of mitigation, it must be recognized that the most vulnerable people, even much more in terms of population and demographic, are in urgent need of climate adaptation measures, and they require these finances to help them, to grow. Again, is that there needs to be an increase in South-South cooperation, and I think that's why also this conference is very relevant. I know China has put in $3.1 billion US dollars in climate in South-South financing for climate change. I don't know how much of that is going into adaptation. I actually wrote a research proposal for my university to study, to make some checks on that, to know how much of this financing is going into climate adaptation, or is it heavily tilted on mitigation. I know as a consequence of that, I know they announced this in 2016 during the COP22 as well, when they also had some meetings with the US on this. But I think it would be really important to know how much of this is going to climate adaptation. How can the South-South cooperation on climate change be improved to make sure that countries who are in the most immediate need and at the brink of extinction are very well catered for? Their population are very well catered for, because we are playing with a huge crisis. If they're not taken care of, they're going to be international migrants. They're coming to your countries, whether it's Europe or anywhere around it. You're going to take them in as refugees. You can't let them sink in the sea. You can't let them out there on the cold. So it's our collective responsibility, but as in a South-South cooperation and a global cooperation frame, to make sure that these gaps are filled. So South-South cooperation will be important for this, but also global financing will be extremely crucial. But again, these countries have to prioritize climate change as an important component of their development. I get a sense from some African countries that this is not the case, because some of the leaders are not understanding of what is actually facing us. A lot of problems I find, for example, in my country, in Nigeria, are climate-related challenges that needs to be solved from the roots. But they always deploy military security here and there, and I write the best I can. But these things are not things you solve with macho military power. You have to solve the problems from the foundation, and our countries have to recognize this. But in all of this, financing is extremely key. I think I will stop here, and I will also stay by if there are questions, and also to have more interaction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chiagozie. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Paolo, who's going to...
okay. I am absolutely, very impressed about both of the presentation we had until now. After we will comment in the end. But the last one that was mentioned, Udeh, about the financing, that is a trap. It's true, it's a trap, because all the financing that is supposed to go to the emerging countries many times are going just to make business, to make infrastructure that are getting destroyed and be rebuilt again. So I think the win-win, like they say, let's see if all the billions who are arriving now from the new, we are coming from the NDB, the Bank of the BRICS, the ADB, the Bank of China, the IPSA, like that, they are financing climate change adaptation, because that is the most important thing to do now at this moment. Well, let's go on to continue with the presentation. I think now we have Guilia Ramirez. She has to make a presentation. I don't know exactly how to present her from where she's coming. I think she's talking about the engagement of young people. Well, this is another important topic in the climate change of the global south. So I am very content that we are touching all the elements. Like before, the Surtiari was talking about women inclusiveness. So I think that Palmira should present herself, and then just 2 words of who she is, and she's coming from Mexico. Okay. Buenos días, Palmira. Adelante. A ti. Palmira, put the microphone. Palmira, el micrófono. We don't hear you.
I think there's a problem with the voice. We can't hear you.
Now, yes. Mira.
She's switching to the headphones now, so maybe it will work.
Well, in Mexico this time, I don't know what hour it is, but it's been in the middle of the, still is, must be 5 o'clock in, no, 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
Not yet, not yet. Okay, maybe we can go ahead to the next presentation and
yes,
then
I
Pablo
think so. I think it's better.
Okay.
But because, I mean, Russell Meyer and Himawati, they have to talk about something they've been already presenting in the other years here about the earthen architecture and about the damages that plastic is doing all around the world. I don't know. I think maybe it's better we go on with them. But I know them. They have to. I give them the time. We have 15 minutes, not more, because I know that they're liking to talk very much. Okay. Are you ready?
All right. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear
Okay.
me? All right. I'm sharing my presentation.
Okay.
Is that?
Here we
Can
are.
you guys see that? Yes. All right. Wonderful. All right. Om Swastiastu from Bali. Assalamu alaikum teman-teman di Indonesia. Et bonjour à tout le monde en France. Un grand remercie à toute l'équipe de la conférence pour leur travail. Thank you to Paolo and Devon for chairing this session. My partner and Annie, we're going to present 2 papers. We're just going to do the one, to be clear, but Annie is here. Annie?
Hi, guys.
We're delighted to
Hello.
return. We're delighted to return and see such a large participation and interest in ecology. It is, in fact, many more folks than Paolo and I had in our session last year. Am I not right, Paolo?
Yes, I remember very good. And I've been
so
very
many.
impressed about it.
As Dr. Sima said in her inauguration address on Friday, or sorry, on Thursday, COVID has in a way brought us together. The persistence of the conference through COVID is reminiscent of the perseverance of the ideas from the original Bandung Spirit Conference. Personally, this year's conference has been a fabulous motivation to finalize the paper I will be presenting to you guys today. The theme of the rise of Asia and the question of what a multipolar world holds for the global future are the perfect context for this first presentation of an Earthen Ethic. This philosophy paper represents a decade of deep reflection on plastic that is directly inspired by my time living with the Igorot people of the Northern Philippines. As one of the few unconquered indigenous people of Southeast Asia, they have long lived in harmony with their ecosystem. Their ancestral wisdom tradition, focused as it is on ecological harmony, has much significance for us today and inspires this paper. Okay. So in our world today, as we realize the depth of ecological crises, we all want to do something. In fact, that's why we have so many participants today, is everyone is very keen to do something about the issues. And we've just heard a couple of presentations where people are proposing things that we can do to improve, or that is the intention, to improve the ecologies around us. Rather frantically though, all sorts of new technologies and enterprises are not just being proposed, but happening. However, with all the good intentions, the essence of what exactly is good for the biosphere isn't so clear. Indeed, this paper is written to this very issue. What is green? What is in fact a greening ecological contribution? So Paolo, I won't be talking about ecobricks in this paper, but we're going to go deeper to the metaphysics, to the ethics behind ecological movements and contributions. This month, Bill Gates is releasing a book on how to fight climate change. Are his geoengineering ideas green? What about his bioengineered meat? How about the idea of taking plastic out of the ocean to make sneakers? Are these, in fact, enriching the biosphere? This paper tries to make sense of my own personal moral intuitions about plastic. Annie and I ecobrick our plastic, and for a long time now, I felt this is a much better solution than recycling. After working in a recycling factory, this was reinforced. But why exactly? Even last year, if Paolo, you were to ask me, I would be hard pressed to give you a solid philosophical reasoning for these intuitions. Now, before I launch into the paper, I'd like to talk a little bit about myself as the author. Proposing ecological solutions is a big responsibility. Given all our personal as well as collective complicity in the consumption of plastic and the burning of carbon that marks our age, I believe that Gandhi's words and emphasis on personal responsibility are more important than ever. So, inspired, I make the distinction between our household impacts and enterprises. I believe that if we cannot manage to make our own households green, then we'll never be able to manage our enterprises, let alone propose a manageable solution for everyone else. In this way, as you will see, I seem to agree with Paolo and Yanti that it isn't so much about technology as it is paradigm shifting. So here you can see, go into more detail on this in the paper. You can see that Annie and I, our plastic consumption is 10% of the Indonesian per capita average. Our CO2 is 46%. Also, I go into the enterprise impacts of writing this particular paper. This is pretty exhaustive, and I'll be sharing the link to both the report, the Green Impact Report of writing this paper, as well as to this impact analysis. But as you can see, the net impact in terms of plastic and CO2 of doing this particular writing enterprise is subtractive. All right, without further ado, I'd like to begin with reading the introductory chapter of my essay. Imagine a world where the very way we live is steadily enriching the ecosystems around us. It is a world where our households and communities, just by thriving, make the biosphere a greener, more abundant, and more livable place for us and our fellow species. It is a world where every company and corporation, just by doing business, is subtracting CO2 and plastic from the biosphere. It is a world in which all our enterprises, large and small, account not just for their financial expenses and revenues, but also their gray and green ecological impacts. Here, concepts such as minimizing footprints, net zero, zero waste, carbon neutral are relics. No longer do we strive to minimize our gray harm. Instead, we strive to maximize our greening contributions. In this world, our culture and economy are like voices syncing in song with the planet's cycles, a chorus of ecological harmony rising up with us towards the stars. I believe to the extent you and I can imagine this world, it is not nearly as distant as many despair. I also believe that this is a vision we all long for and aspire to. Like our love of a song well sung, of coordinated colors, of symmetrical shapes, the call to harmony unites us across continents and cultures. Indeed, I have come to see that our transition to authentic ecological contribution is a part of an epic planetary story whose direction is literally in our hands. So how do we get to this beautiful world we all long for? I've got one word for you: plastic. It is said in permaculture that the problem is always the solution. Through my personal plastic journey, I've come to see that our everyday plastic is in fact a grand opportunity for awakening. That ubiquitous material we all love to hate is in fact a portal. By looking at it closely and stepping through, a great ethical advance awaits us. Up until now, our understanding of how to contribute to ecological harmony has been juvenile, incomplete, and human-centered. Our definition of greening has been limited to simply reducing harm. However, through insights gleaned from plastic's ancient Earth story, we can gain unprecedented clarity and confidence into the fundamental principles of biosphere enrichment. With this foundation, we can reorient our current enterprises and technologies and build new ones from the ground up. All right, and then I launch into what I call the long story of plastic, where I look at how plastic came to us. Plastic may not be the most dire of our ecological crises, but it certainly is the one that causes us the most shame. However, we're waking up now to where our plastic is going. All these documentaries, investigative journalism are showing where plastic is ending up. Now, however, it is time to remember where plastic came from. And in so doing, we're going to see that plastic is valuable, just not in the way we thought. The long story of plastic. So forgive me, any scientists in the room, this is going to be a very succinct review of the Earth's history and how we got plastic into our hands. I go into much more detail in the essay. 2 billion years ago, the Earth was a barren planet. Then life figured out how to turn CO2 into building blocks and energy. Life took off from the sea. Algae and plankton sucked down CO2 to build their biomass. Plants covered the planet. When they died, they were covered up by more plants and more plants and more plants. Slowly but surely, all that biomass was buried, compacted, and stored. The planet's climate stabilized. Humans emerged. We figured out how to burn wood. Then we figured out to dig up that ancient carbon and burn it. We called it fossil fuels. We called it coal, petrol, oil, natural gas. our petro-capital powered economies took off. However, fossil fuels weren't meant to be fuels. This is compacted carbon the Earth is stored under the ground. When we process and refine this crude, 5 to 15% cannot be turned into fuels. However, that leftover is great for making polymers. Plastics were born, and we solved all sorts of problems with plastics. As our economies grew, more fuel was refined and more plastic was generated, more fuel was refined, more plastic was generated, and soon it just began to pile up. Industry tried to manage the leftover plastic, but because the raw materials for plastic are so cheap and so abundant, and from the oil industry, it was much easier to make it from new. So plastic kept piling up. Industry had to distract from its ecological impacts in order to convince us to continue consuming, and still the plastic piled up. Is then we began to realize that we had a problem. All right, I'd like to read another section from my essay.
Okay.
Yes, Paolo?
No, yes, okay, no. I was saying that this is what you were showing was absolutely clear this time. And I think that when you were making the presentation of last year, I think it was, or 2 years ago, it seemed like it was something, well, far out, far away. I think after 1 year, this is getting still more impressive, more urgent, and the application of the new technologies in every field, including the use of different materials and the elimination of plastic, like now everyone is going to change the car to electric cars, could have been done 20 years ago, but they're doing it now. So I think will be a big push up now to go up in this direction. And I think we have to change our habits. If you're not living in a big city, maybe you're not needing to go down and to buy 6 bottles of mineral water, but you can go to take water from the fountain or something like that. So I think it's really, like I said before, a different vision globally to put together modern technologies and respect of the environment. Okay, I think we must go now to the presentation of Palmira, and then we'll make the discussion after. Okay?
I'm still in the middle of my presentation, Paolo. How much time do I have left?
You have 5 minutes, my God. I thought you were ended with that. Go on.
No, I'm just halfway through here.
Okay, sorry then. Sorry, I lost time.
Okay.
Go on fast.
Okay,
all right.
Yeah, all right. So what I was in the midst of about to read, only through this epical unfolding can we look out with this vast vantage upon the Earth's and our own story. Rather than be mired in self-judgment at our play with carbon, we can be dazzled by the Earth's. The way the Earth has processed its carbon, has greened its surface, steadily cultivating ever higher livability, biodiversity, harmony, and consciousness. And finally, with the Earth's prescient carbon storage and consciousness ignited, we can ponder the story itself. So where do we go from here? First, let us hold fast to our hard advantage and the sweeping view it affords. From here, we can observe another pivotal phenomenon. Aside from some meteor strikes and massive volcanoes, it is a phenomenon unseen on the planet for hundreds of millions of years. Thanks to the doings of us and our ancestors, never before has the Earth's atmospheric balance of CO2 jumped upwards so quickly. Never before has there been a process that so quickly added more carbon to the biosphere than they removed. The ensuing ecological disturbances directly challenge us and our current play with carbon. All right, so the Earth's example, our once in a million year phenomenon of additive carbon usage is in fact a tremendous opportunity. For the first time, with our use of carbon as a foil, we can discern the wisdom of the Earth. Rather than simply learn from our mistakes, we can learn from a master. In the past, we've learned from the examples of great human teachers. The ethics that have resulted have been human-centered. The Earth provides a magnificent example to follow that transcends continents and cultures. From our billion-year vantage, we can observe earthen principles in its example. So I'm observing 6 main principles in the way that the Earth has gone from a barren planet to the thriving biosphere we have today. Observe the way that the Earth has used its carbon as short-term building blocks. In the Serengeti, we see how carbon molecules go from the grass to the wildebeest to the lion, back to the grass, over and over indefinitely. Observe the way the Earth has concentrated, compacted, secured carbon for the long term. So we saw in the long story, the compaction of carbon, taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, and greening the biosphere. Observe the way the Earth has subtracted more carbon into storage than it has added back to the biosphere. So if we chart the decrease in CO2, if we chart the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere since 600 million years ago till now, we see a net decrease. Observe how the Earth has raised the consciousness of interconnection. The rise of sentient human life in society, the rise of interconnections between trees to share nutrients and share information in forests. Consciousness has gone upwards and increased over time. Observe how the Earth increased biodiversity. So over the course of the last 600 million years, this is a famous curve by Sapkowski, where he charted the fossil record over time and showed that there was a net increase in biodiversity over the Earth's history. And number 6 is my favorite and the most interesting. Observe the way the earthen processes circulate outward and upward benefits. So this is the salmon in my part of the world. They have a cycle of 7 years, and in so doing, they feed bears and eagles and all sorts of creatures along the riverways that they migrate through. They feed their organisms in the ocean. They don't hoard or save. They don't have offshore savings accounts. Instead, the benefits that come from their life cycle get shared around and help thrive the ecology. The Wet'suwet'en, the First Nation people of my land, they revere the salmon and live to its example. So with these earthen ethics, we can see our plastic anew. Plastic is part of the ancient process of greening the biosphere. Plastic is also an artifact of the petrocapital economy. Keeping plastic out of industry reduces the momentum of the petrocapital economy. Keeping plastic out of the biosphere is a valuable ecological service. So here we have what I call an earthen ethic. Based on the example of the biosphere, based on the example of the Earth and the way that it cultivated the biosphere, we can form an ethic that we can use to evaluate our technologies, enterprises, our households, everything that we do, to make sure that it's in line with our longing to actually be greening the biosphere. In the essay, I take a look at industrial plastic management. I took a look at and evaluated using those 6 criteria. We see that it is linear, not circular. That's the nature of single-use plastic, is you don't use it over again. There's no plan for concentration or storage. The processing is net additive. Lots of energy and CO2 are created in the process. There's no allowance for the sequestration of CO2. The process itself reduces consciousness, so people are not aware of the impacts of their consumption because of the marketing that goes around it. And of course, there's no support for biodiversity. Factories and dumps, they take up ecosystems that were there before. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, it's a for-profit business model. So profit comes first, Earth, it might be an intention, but it comes second. Plastic sequestration, on the other hand, is a technology that I'm proposing from the ground up as an ecological contribution. The criteria for sequestration, plastic sequestration, is the compaction must result in short-term building blocks. This is easy to do by compacting plastic. Building applications must result in long-term usage that secures and stores plastic. Easy to do. The Earth did it by putting the CO2 under the ground. We can do the same thing to secure it from all forms of degradation. By keeping an impact accounting of the subtractive impacts versus the positive impacts, the additive impacts, we can make sure that it is net green. And this is pretty easy because plastic is essentially carbon. And by just taking it out of the biosphere, we are sequestering. And that's net subtractive right there. The processing and building must be local. Engaging the consumers, engaging people who use their plastic, which raises consciousness. The building applications must complement biodiversity. So by using the building blocks to assist gardens, green spaces, to shelter forests, it can increase and support biodiversity. Finally, it must be a profit for Earth and not a not-for-profit enterprise, which is easy to do.
2 minutes left.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Paolo. Yeah, no problem. So this is what I call petrocapital transition. Using plastic, using an artifact from the petrocapital economy, we can empower the transition from it. As the value of ecological contribution rises, so too will the value in fiat currency and petrocapital currency, and it can be invested back in to transition from it. We can also use it to evaluate other technologies. So this isn't just for plastic. This ethic applies to all of our endeavors by looking at how what we're doing compares to the Earth's ancient example. We can reformulate, we can even discard our current technologies, and we can create technologies from the ground up that we can be confident are ecological contributions to the biosphere. And so this is the new world. Together, we can follow the Earth's example to orient our household, enterprises, and technologies towards authentic greening contributions. Okay, thank you, Paolo.
Thank you very much, Russell. It has been very clear.
Thanks for your mid-presentation commentary.
I'm sorry, but I thought it was
It's okay. I appreciate that you could see the evolution in our thinking from our last presentation, because indeed we touched on this.
Now let's talk to Palmira.
We thought it was more important. All right.
Let's give the word to Palmira. Palmira.
Oh, just one last thing. Sorry, Paolo. I'm going to post, folks. I'm going to post a link to this paper into the chat for the Zoom.
Yes. No. After I will ask to all the
panelists
to send each other all the presentations. Okay.
Just one comment before Palmira goes. If persons have questions, please put it in the chat, because we wouldn't have a lot of time for you to actually ask the questions. So just put it in the chat, put the name of the presenter that the question is for. Then when the presenters speak finally at the end, they can address all questions that was posed to them. Thank you.
Palmira, a ti.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Sí.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So quickly. So hello everyone. Bonjour à tous. Merci beaucoup pour l'opportunité. I'm Palmira from Mexico. I am early career from Mexico, and I have double bachelor from Earth Science and Food Security. So firstly, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and I hope you are safe and healthy and welcome from the other side of the world. So the topic I will talk is the engagement of young people in climate policies in the Global South, mainly focuses on early career researchers. Next one, please. Can you share for my presentation?
What's happening?
Because this is the Astra.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah,
yes.
but it's only the Astra. I need the presentation, please.
Hold on. I don't know what happened.
You have to change only the screen, I think.
Okay. So I think this is it, right?
Yeah, this is. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, the next one, please. Yeah, but this session is on ecology and sustainability. Before to start, I want to remember the two concepts. So can you return, please? Well, no. Yeah, back, please.
Okay.
Yeah, for the second one. Yeah, this is okay. Thank you. So only to remember the two concepts, the ecology and sustainability. So the next one, please. Next one. Thank you. We have all here knows that the Sustainable Development Agenda, if not, it's a work plan to achieve in the next 9 years for all people and species in the world. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a call for action by all countries to promote prosperity while protecting the planet. So we have 17 goals with targets that the other speakers say. So you can see also that climate change and environmental protection are on the table. So in this case, now we are living in the pandemic context, so I don't need to say what is going on around the world, but I want to express my concern about that. This situation is a governance problem, and why? Because we need a closer scientific cooperation than ever, and we need to understand the complex situations and relation with our ecosystems and systems. But at the same time, we need peace, partnerships, and looking forward for a common future. So you can see this is the 5 course for Sustainable Development Agenda. This is your right side. Yes, right side. So climate change and the pandemic are global change uses that we need to address by a new governance. So this is not only a scientific problem to resolve. The next one, please. Next one, thank you. So we have a new concept that is Earth system governance, that is, in a few words, an environmental policies and nature conservation that puts this into the context that Earth system transformation by humans. So for this, we have two new concepts, that is science diplomacy in this side, and the other side is science policies interface. For the first one, science diplomacy, we have science in diplomacy, diplomacy for science, and science for diplomacy, that the Triple A's say that is an organization for science diplomacy in the United States. So according to the UNESCO, science policies interface and the global level are important for the international community to ensure that decisions and international agreements, such as the Sustainable Development Agenda. So, but young people, we are here, but what is the role that we are playing in this complex situation? So, of course, as a young people in climate science, we put our effort to understand and study climate change effects, but we need more. We need to start up to building a new governance. So young people are on the street, of course. We are demanding a better future. We are in the high-level meetings. We are in scientific conference at this, but we are working with communities too. But the most important that you can see is we are part of the all sustainable system. We are care our biosphere. We are doing our best effort for our society, and also we are an economic potential for our countries. So the next one, please. Next one, please. Yeah. No, back, please. Can you back? Yeah, back. Okay, but this conference is focused on Asia. Some countries of the region facing the same problems as we have in Latin America and Caribbean. We have an inequality between global North and global South. Right now in our region, it's not just climate change. We are faced with poverty, inequality, migration, economic uses, and others. So, however, in the current context, it was difficult for countries to take concrete actions, even when the General Secretary of United Nations has called for a green recovery. The next one, please. So, the last year, during 2020, ambitious processes such as nationally determined contributions of Udeh should have been carried out in the world. NDCs are the contribution that every country have to do to achieve Paris Agreement and face global warming. So in this context, young people, mainly in the global South, have been working to address that, even when a lot of offices are closed around our countries, even when a lot of young people can participate because, they have not connectivity, they have not internet, so this is more difficult to do this. But young people and green recovery are in the same way. So we're speaking different languages to bring the climate emergency. We are building resilience so fast. We are adapting to this new normal context. So the next one, please. So in this context, I want to share with you some best practices of young people in Latin America. Some countries as Bolivia, Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico started a young processes to be added to the new NDCs. And I want to share with you the Mexican experience because I was part of it. Firstly, I want to say that a few young early careers, young people in science, we started a negotiations with Mexican governments to put our science diplomacy skills to open these places. We are working since the beginning of 2020, and we have different webinars between young people and Mexican governments. We have round tables from different uses. As you can see, Ocean, sorry, this is in Spanish, but this is the call as Ocean with your people in science talking about climate change, adaptation, mitigation, resilience for our ocean. And also, we put the best available science and give inputs in who early careers can achieve for the implementation of NDC in Mexico. So we are working also with adaptation area, but the most important for us is to help that these kind of processes bring the most vulnerable young people in our country, in Mexico. So, of course, we have to do more work. You know, right now the Mexican climate change policies are not enough, but we are in the way. So, other best practices that I want to share with you is the Escazú Agreement. I don't know if you know what is that, but the Escazú Agreement is agreement from Latin America, that is from Latin America to the world. And as you can see here in your right, you can see these three goals, main goals for Escazú Agreement. So I think this is a good best practices that other regions, mainly in the global south, like Africa, like Asia, can be shared with us when I'm going Latin America and the Caribbean. The next one, please.
5 minutos.
Yeah.
O menos.
Thank you. Yeah, so far. So what is next? Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, we have common problems. We have common uses to resolve, but we are sharing also that we are growing economics. Our population is growing. Some countries are very young, like Mexico is a young country. So we can be the leaders for climate justice because, you know, the climate change is inequality problem. So we can be the leaders for this climate justice in our countries, but also for the older world. We are living the climate change influence, loss and damage that the other speaker says too. So we need a new global governance, that global south has to be in the top. So we need to share more experience and best practices like NDC's processes and Escazú Agreement, and share who our leaders are addressing climate change in the global south that is very different from the global north. So in the case of early careers, the young people in science, we have to understand who policies are working. We have to understand what is diplomacy and who it works, and bring our knowledge for this decision making with the best available science. So as you can see, South-South cooperation is a good way to achieve and address climate change, mainly for our countries. So thank you so much, and sorry it was so fast. Thank you so much.
Very good, and thank you very much about what you were expressing. And it's very interesting to hear because we heard from Indonesia, we heard from Africa, now we hear from Caribbean and Latin America. The problems are exactly the same all around. And well, I am much older than all of you. I remember I was younger, assisting in Rio conference in 1992, and they were saying we were all mad talking about climate change and like that. And now is in the word of everyone. So I think that what we are telling now, I hope it's not passing 30 years to get improved, but I think the pandemic has been raising the awareness of people about the need of a global change. Okay, So now I think we have some questions, and I think Devon, you're looking at the chat. I think it would be interesting to hear the questions, and then maybe we'll make some final remarks because we have 10 minutes, not more than that. So Devon, I leave to you to read the questions.
So I would suggest that the persons who have to answer, that they read the questions and answer them at the same time. I think that's probably going to work better. I don't see any questions for Paolo, I think. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is go to Yanti first. Yanti and Ayu.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Devon. Well, for maintenance of infrastructures, finance could be determinant. But next to that, so finance could generate sluggish implementation of maintenance. But I believe that more important is the lack of critical actors which have access or even control finances. So that might be a core issue why maintenance have been largely lacking. So I believe a lack of critical actors who have the authority or even who have access to financing for maintenance of infrastructures. I hope it gives some idea, or it
yeah, certainly. Actually, I'm from Guyana.
Yeah.
And also our infrastructure in Guyana was also built by the Dutch, and we have the very same problem with Indonesia. Okay, so let's go to Russell. Russell and Annie, you guys have a question there.
Yeah, sure. So would you like me to read the question, or the other person?
I think everyone can read it. So just, I would say go ahead and just start answering it.
Okay. All right. So there's a couple questions in there. Let me do my best to kind of answer them all together. So the Earthen Ethic is definitely not just for personal obligation, but it's meant to apply to enterprises in particular, actually, on how they can evaluate what they're currently doing, especially if the intention is to be an ecological contribution. And for sure, they can use it to construct their new technologies, their new products, their new processes from the ground up. And if they're proposing a technology, to establish criteria. So Paolo mentioned that Annie and I represent the Global Ecobrick Alliance. We have used the Earthen Ethics to develop the criteria for plastic sequestration. Ecobricking is one way to sequester plastic, but there could be other ways to do it. And so our institution, our organization, our Earth Enterprise, we call it, we have developed from the Earthen Ethic the criteria for plastic sequestration, so that other folks who are packing plastic in Africa, making tiles with compressed plastic is a popular thing right now. They can make sure that they're doing it in a way that is an ecological contribution. And if it is, then it's even more valuable than just the capital value of it. If you read my paper, I'm actually pretty skeptical of our current ecological attempts at contributions, what we're doing now. My observation is that insofar as they're within the petrocapital economy, it's very, very difficult to actually be doing anything of benefit for the ecosystem. And this is why the CO2 is going straight up, and we have so much plastic in the ocean. So I believe this is a really important ethic, so that we can not just level out that, but that we can go in a greening direction together, all of us, and make sure that our green impacts are much greater than our gray. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So I'm gonna go now to Chiagozie. You have questions from Yanti, and as well one from Sumpana. So please try to answer both of them in one go. Thanks.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes,
yes,
I'm
okay,
here.
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I will try to answer the question from the last one and then to the one from Yanti. So it's about how funding can improve ecology. Yeah, I think I think from this end, first is that there's a lot of technological innovation that is coming up, chiefly tilted towards mitigation. But also, if we have sufficient funding, we can also develop a lot of technology that can be helpful for adaptation. The Fund for Ecology can help in diverse ways because it's a great interconnection for the entire ecosystem. There's there's the environmental perspective, there is the biodiversity perspective, there is the nature-based solution, which is intersecting in all of these. And then there's also the climate change adaptation perspective. All in all of this, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's purely environmental or on climate change, they are adaptive components to all of them, be it in human capacity building and deploying technology or infrastructure upgrade or in planning. You know, it's very much interconnected, of course, with distinct areas of focus, but quite interconnected. So it'll be very crucial to have ecology funding, you know, in and around this in different areas and in different capacities. Regarding non-allied movements for climate adaptation financing and how UN can help in all of this. UN, as always, is trying to help mobilize international development partners, international financing partners in different states, in different scopes. In fact, recently we had the Global Adaptation Summit, which was hosted by the government of Netherlands, facilitated by the Global Center for Adaptation, which of course is not a UN outfit, but it's also, you know, one important organization that has put adaptation at the fulcrum of climate action. As best as we know, UN can only mobilize partners, mobilize member states, mobilize international partners, point them to the right direction, provide critical information to point them to areas which is required. I think this was the reason why the Secretary General had the Climate Action Summit in 2019 and has been, you know, having high-level champions on climate change, prioritizing climate change in everything he says. So I think it's an important priority for the UN, an important priority for international development partners, but also the buck stops at the government table who are financing. So if we're able to also get the government partners to come on board, that would be great. Non-allied movement will be really helpful here because making sure that adaptation is on the agenda as a priority and that the financing component follows it. It's the work that non-allied movements would chiefly be able to do to build the visibility, to build the pressure, to build the momentum, to bring it to the level where you cannot just ignore this. Just like young people did with climate action, you had a lot of climate strikes, a lot of young people striking around the world, protesting here and there, and it brought sufficient attention to global climate challenges. We had countries declaring climate emergencies here and there. We had, you know, governments being responsive, declaring more budgets. So this would be crucial, very, very much for countries, I think.
They want to cut us in 1 minute. My God.
Yeah. Okay. So Palmira, quickly, can you reply, and then Paolo just wrap it up.
Well, I would be very fast because we have been raising a lot of things that require, I think, 1 month of discussion. I think it's important that we, being on the rise of Asia, that we consider the role of non-countries, what non-aligned countries they can do. Well, they can start to think, to shift their policies, and about that, I would say this in the few months. Now, for example, I'm working with the institution in Holland, the International Association of Social Quality. European Union is accepting now all the principles of approaching whatever it is for the future within a new way.
Business in Asia, while the challenge,
Okay.